So I want you to imagine it was a Sunday morning similar to this one. The leaves outside were starting to change colors. The air was crisp and cool. When you went outside, going to work or whatever they were doing, is you couldn't help but just take a deep breath of that cool air. You see, this morning, she was getting ready to go to church, and this morning was just like any other Sunday morning, but this Sunday morning, something was different. You see, for years and years, she was trying to get pregnant. She was trying and trying and trying, and nothing was happening. For years and years, she would go to the doctors, and the doctors couldn't help. She would go and try and get help from various home remedies. That wasn't doing anything. Every single thing she tried didn't work. She was getting increasingly frustrated. She was feeling down. She was feeling depressed. She was feeling if God had almost like forgotten about her, didn't care about her. In her mind, she just wanted to give up on the whole God thing altogether. Her husband, feeling this weight of her wife's depression and her wife's just feeling so down. He himself feeling inadequate, feeling not good enough. He himself, you see, he was older in age, recently retired. And so one day, on this Sunday morning, he takes out a pregnancy test that they have, the last one that they had bought. He goes up to her gently. She just says, just take this pregnancy test, just one more time. That's it, he begged. And so she agreed, knowing in her mind that if this pregnancy test came back negative one more time, she wouldn't be able to handle it. So she walked into the bathroom and began to take this test. Then after you take these tests, you have to wait 3 minutes. So Rachel is sitting in the bathroom, staring at this pregnancy test. And in the first minute, she didn't see anything. In the second minute, she didn't see anything. And the disappointment just swept over her. She felt so much sorrow that she fell to the bathroom floor and just started crying, unable to just contain her emotion. But then, through the blurriness of her tears, she began to see something forming. She began to see another line forming, something that she's never seen before. Could it be, was she actually pregnant? Rachel, in this moment, she began to tremble. Her heart started racing. Could she actually be pregnant? My wife, Elaine, and I can remember the first day that we saw this positive pregnancy test. It was a Sunday morning. Elena was in the bathroom, and she took this pregnancy test. And I can remember that morning walking into the room, and she just was so happy. Once we saw this pregnancy test, we were so overjoyed with happiness and with joy. And I can remember in my mind saying, oh man, first thing I remember thinking of, I am so excited. It was actually a Sunday morning, and so after that, we ended up going to church. But that Sunday morning, literally didn't care about church or God for 1 second. All I cared was about this positive pregnancy test. I don't know what the message was about. I don't know what the sermon was about. I don't know what the music was about. I don't even know who I talked to that day. All I remember is this positive pregnancy test. One of the things that I do remember thinking is number one, I want to buy this baby something. Like I feel like there's something that I can buy this baby right now. And so in my mind, I was like, if it's a boy, it's going to be a Buffalo Bills jersey for sure. If it's a girl, Buffalo Bills jersey for sure. It ended up being a girl, and then my wife actually vetoed the Buffalo Bills jersey, and instead she actually decided to buy out Disneyland. And so her room right now, Disneyland's exploded in there. Third thing, this is going to cost me a lot of money. And fourth thing, I don't think I've ever changed a diaper in my life before. But you know what I didn't think about? For 1 second, I did not think about God. I didn't think about God's mercy, his grace, and his love for my situation specifically. I didn't think about God for a second there. And as I worked through that, I began to think, why do we, as a church in America, why do we pray for miracles? Why do we ask God all these things that we need? We're praying for all of this stuff. And then when God comes through, when something good happens into our life, why do I not even think about God? We think about God in the negative and the hard times in life, and we're praying for all these things to happen. But when the good things happen, we tend to not think about God. Why do we do that? You know, Rachel, she's sitting on the bathroom floor, tears streaming down her face, changing from ones of sorrow to absolute joy. She yells, "Jacob," her husband, "Jacob, get in here." Jacob comes running into the room, and there he saw the positive pregnancy test. They were so happy. They were so overjoyed. You see, Jacob and Rachel, they deserved to be barren. Because of their age, they were older. Jacob, like I said, was recently retired. They deserved to be infertile. But God showed mercy on their life. And instead of infertility, 9 months later, they birthed a son named Joseph, a man who is literally about to change the world. So today like I said, we're continuing this series called Living the Jesus Life. And in this series, we're looking at Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. And Jesus is telling us literally what we need to do in order to live the life that God has called us to. He's telling us if we want to step into our God-given potential, if we want to have real faith, then we must put into actions the words that Jesus is speaking in Matthew chapter 5. Last week, like I said, we looked at Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. This week is Matthew chapter 5, verse 7. It says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And this morning, just for the next few minutes, I just want to talk about what it means to be people of mercy. What it means to be people of mercy. You see, mercy is not getting what you deserve. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. And so if we relate to this to the Christian context, because of your sin, because of my sin, we deserve to go to hell. We deserve judgment. As I was doing this message, I had two names. One you'll see on your notes, it was called Great Mercy. The other one I was talking about is You Deserve to Go to Hell. That was the title that I was thinking about. People online would have just eaten that right up. But I went with the Great Mercy one. It seems a little more encouraging. But what mercy really is mercy is not getting what we deserve. And we do not deserve to go to heaven. We do not deserve to live this full life that Jesus has for us. But because God sent his only son, Jesus, to die on the cross for us, then we have the opportunity to unlock all of this stuff in our life solely because of Jesus held back what we deserved. Jesus, we know in the Bible, tells us that God is rich in mercy. But the only reason he is that, and the only reason why he's rich in mercy, is because of his son Jesus. And just like the pregnancy test to Rachel was specific to her, and just like God had mercy on my situation specifically, one of the things that we're going to do this morning is we have to look at mercy in the lens of looking at it to ourselves personally. Not just Jesus has mercy for humanity, which is true, but this morning, I want us to think about it as Jesus has mercy for me specifically in my situation, because that's exactly what happened here. And as we look into the Bible, one of the things that we'll find out is one of the things that Jesus says is love because I first loved you. And so the principle that Jesus is explaining is that the reason why we should have mercy is because God first showed us mercy. And in the Bible, one of the things that we'll see is God shows us what to do before he asks us to do it. God shows us what to do first before he asks us to do it. And so if we want to live the Jesus life, one of the first things that we have to do if you want to live the Jesus life, if you want to live the life that God has called you to, is living your life by example and being that godly example to all those around you. So, Joseph is the son of Rachel and Jacob. And Joseph actually, if you read the story in Genesis, he actually grew up in a really messed up family. His family was all sorts of messed up. Because you see, Joseph actually had 10 older half-brothers. Basically, that means Jacob was the same father, but the 10 older half-brothers was to a different mother. And so he grew up, he had 10 older half-brothers. And like any large family, I can imagine they grew up together, they ate together, they fought together, they worked together, they watched football on Sunday together. But one thing was different in this family. The Bible tells us that of all the siblings, Joseph was the favorite. Today we would say if you're the youngest, you're the favorite. But Joseph, being one of the two youngest, he was the favorite. And you can see probably why. Jacob loved Rachel a lot. He had to work for 14 years just to get Rachel's dad to bless their marriage. So he put in a lot of work with Rachel. Plus, because of their old age, they should have been infertile. But then they had Joseph, this miracle baby. And so Joseph grew up in an area, in a place where he was the favorite child. And so Joseph, for the next 17 years, lived his life as the favorite child. For Christmas, you guys can imagine Joseph, he'd be getting these coats from Gucci, while his brothers, his 10 older half-brothers, instead of coats from Gucci, they begin hand-me-downs from the Goodwill. And this continued his entire life, all the way up till he was 17 years old. Do you think this would cause some tension in this family? Absolutely. There'd be a ton of tension here. Over time, the joy and the unity of this family slowly began to crumble under the pull of favoritism. If we want to know how not to live the Jesus life, if we look at these 17 years on how Jacob and Rachel raised their family, this would be a perfect example. So this favoritism, it continued. The favoritism kept happening, and this continued until one day Joseph is 17 years old. His 10 older half-brothers, they're out working in the field. Joseph is going to go and check on them. So Joseph is walking to the field to go and check on his brothers, and his 10 older half-brothers see him coming. Hatred in their hearts, just so mad at this favoritism that Joseph is getting. They talk amongst themselves and they conspire and they think about how they can get rid of Joseph. And so after some conspiring, Joseph comes, and what they decide to do is they decide to take Joseph and to sell him into slavery. And that is exactly what happened. And so Joseph in a moment, think about this, Joseph in a moment goes from the favorite in his family to a slave in a cage heading towards Egypt. Everything in his life changed now. And the Bible tells us that Joseph, he's in this dirty, this crowded, this cage, and he's screaming and he's crying at his brothers in the distance. He's saying, please help me. Come on, I'm sorry, you can have my coat. Just get me out of this cage. His brothers see him. His brothers hear him. His brothers know that he's in need. They see him crying, and they do nothing about it. They just let it happen. And now Joseph is gone. The favorite child is gone from their life. They don't have to deal with him anymore. Joseph, in this moment, I'm assuming that he was mad at his brothers. He was distraught. He was worried about what's going to happen in his life because everything that was familiar and everything that was safe in Joseph's life, it was now gone. Everything gone. So Joseph, he's a slave, and he makes his way to Egypt. And once he gets to Egypt, he gets sold to this guy named Potiphar. And Potiphar just so happens to be an officer of Pharaoh, the guy that was the highest power of all of Egypt. Even when Joseph did not even realize it, God first was showing that he loved Joseph and that he was there for Joseph. Because you see, over time, Joseph eventually worked his way up and became the number 2 of the entire household. Everything that Joseph touched, it had immense success. Everything that he worked on, everything that he was a part of, it had success. And this brought him up to the place where now he's the number 2 of this entire household. I can imagine Joseph in this moment. He has this, and he's having all the success, and he can say, finally, in my life, things are finally looking up. I don't need my family. I don't need my brothers. My life was horrible. They always kept picked on me. They always beat me up. I don't need my brothers. Look at my situation now. Now I'm the number 2 in Potiphar's household. I don't need any of them. This can be my new family. Then one day, though, Satan attacked Joseph again. But this time it was through the slave master's wife, through Potiphar's wife, another family situation. So Joseph, you see, he was a man of God, and the Bible tells us that he was falsely accused for trying to rape Potiphar's wife. You see, Potiphar's wife was actually the one that was trying to sleep with Joseph. But when Joseph refused, she made up a story that Joseph came into her room and tried to rape her. Potiphar, then believing his wife, was so mad at Joseph that he immediately threw him into prison. So now Joseph, a man who was the favorite in the household of Jacob, goes from getting beat up by his brothers, getting sold into slavery, going into Potiphar's house, and now he's sitting in the pit of the prison. But in this moment, the Bible tells us this in Genesis chapter 39, verse 21. Look what it says. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. God showed Joseph mercy in the moment when he did not deserve it. Joseph was a slave that was accused of raping somebody. He should have sat and rotted the rest of his life in the pit of the prison. That's what should have happened. But God says that God was with Joseph. He was looking after Joseph, when Joseph didn't even realize what was going on. God first showed Joseph mercy. Your sin, my sin, has put us on a fast track to hell. But even when we did not even realize it, God had mercy for us. He held back the judgment even when we did not even personally realize it. We deserved to go to hell. We deserved death. But God said, no. God said, I don't think so. God said, I'm committed to your success despite your failures, despite your inadequacies, despite your insecurities, despite your past sin, and maybe for some of us, even despite your current life situation, I am committed to your success because I have showed you mercy. And so over time, this mercy that was upon Joseph's life, God allowed him to do some things like interpret dreams. And over time, God actually takes Moses, somebody who was rotting away in a prison, and now, through his ability to interpret dreams, now he's the second in command over all of Egypt. The Bible tells us that Joseph had just as much power as Pharaoh himself. God's mercy of Joseph's life helped him go from the pit of the prison all the way to the palace, but this happened over a span of 13 years. So now one day, Joseph, he's 30 years old. His whole life has been defined by dysfunctional family dynamics. And I believe that this dysfunctional family dynamics was still affecting him to this day. Imagine if something dysfunctional like that happened in Joseph's life. It happened all the way up to he was 17 years old. His brothers sold him into slavery. Then it happened again in Potiphar's household. He had every reason to be bitter, to be upset, to hold on to all of this stuff, to want revenge. He could have done that. He could have done that. But then one day, there's actually a famine that happens in Egypt. Famine basically means there's no food available anywhere. Crops weren't growing. Joseph, though, knew that this was going to happen, and so he stored up all of this food in Egypt. And so now the only place in Egypt to get food is through Joseph. He's the one that gives the people food. He's the one that's in charge of all of this. So if you want food, if you want to survive, you got to go through Joseph. So Joseph had all of this stuff in his past. But now remember, his original family, they're a part of this famine. They need food. But if they want food, they got to go through Joseph. So Jacob, the father, he goes and he sends his 10 older half-brothers, sends them to Egypt. And tells them to go and get food. You see, at this time, 13 years has passed. Joseph goes from a teenager to an adult at this time. And so his brothers actually do not even recognize who Joseph is because he changed so much in that span of 13 years. And so the Bible tells us his brothers go up to Joseph and they're asking for food. But this time that they're asking for food, it's different. You see, they've gotten food once before, but this time just something was different. This time, Joseph handpicked out these 10 brothers from this huge crowd and invited them into the palace. And his older brothers in this moment, they're terrified because they got handpicked out of this crowd. And now they're walking into Joseph's massive palace with guards and servants everywhere. And his brothers are approaching, and they're terrified. They don't realize who Joseph actually is. They don't know what's going on. And Joseph, in this moment, I believe he had so many emotions that were going through his body. His love for his brothers because of who they were, the mercy of God that put him in this situation, his ability to interpret all of the dreams, even back when he was younger, his brothers selling him to slavery. It's almost like a flashback to when he's going away on the slave carriage, and he's yelling out to his brothers, and his brothers are saying, "See you later, Joseph." But now his brothers are coming to him. Joseph could have killed them in a second. He could have had the revenge. He could have done all of that stuff. But the Bible tells us, after some testing, Joseph is one final moment. He's just overcome with emotion. So many things going on in his mind. Tears just running down his face. Joseph, in this one final moment, the Bible tells us that he reveals who he actually is to his brothers, and he forgives them and restores the relationship with Joseph. In this moment, I believe Joseph, he was able to take all of his past hurt, all of his pain, all of his anger, all of his bitterness, all of that weight that was just weighing him down. He was able just to let it go and give it to God and forgive Joseph. Because see, part of being people of mercy means that we are understanding what God did for us, and what we are doing instead is forgiving others, because there is immense freedom in forgiveness. There is immense freedom in forgiveness. Being people of mercy means that we forgive other people even when they do not deserve it, because that's what Jesus did for us. Joseph's brothers, honestly, they deserved to die. But instead, Joseph showed them mercy and love. And this mercy and love that Joseph showed him led to the restoration of their family. Joseph was able to go and see his parents again. They were able to have this amazing moment where for 30 years they lived in dysfunctional family dynamics. But then because of God's mercy and because of Joseph's willing to forgive and willing to show mercy to his brothers, restoration occurred. And so much joy ensued out of it, just like the positive pregnancy test. As we close, my dad, he works in addiction medicine. And one of the things that he does is he works constantly with patients that are struggling with alcohol, drugs, you name it. And so there's patients that they want to recover. And so one day this patient comes into the hospital. She's in her 60s, and she has suffering from COPD, which is similar to asthma. And this patient, he comes in, and most patients, what you do for COPD is you give them some medicine, and there's just a protocol that they follow through. This patient was not pretty similar to everybody else. So what he did is he just gave her all the right medicine, had her on bed rest for a few days. Most patients get better within 1-2 days. This patient did not get better. This patient simply stayed the same. Even with all of the right medical stuff that was happening, this patient simply stayed the same. Her health didn't get better. Her COPD was the same. After a few days of no improvement, my dad sat down, looked her in the eye, and began to have an honest conversation with her. See, she had anxiety that was just crippling her life. And what she did is she revealed to my dad that 15 years earlier, with a gun pointed to her head, she was raped. And for 15 years, she suffered from PTSD and extreme anxiety that was just destroying her life. She went to counseling every single day. She was getting all of the right medicine, but still nothing was getting better. For 15 years, nothing was getting better. You see, having a full life that Jesus says in John 10:10, You can do all of the right things. You can take all of the right medicine. You can go and achieve all of the right avenues. But you need the mercy of Jesus if we actually want to be healed. In this situation, this is an extremely hard situation. And then in these moments, the path of healing is long and it is painful. But there still is a path of healing because Jesus says all things are possible because of him. When negative things happen in our lives, and they will and they might, and maybe it's happening right now, we cannot let these things define us. Joseph had every reason to let his past define him. He had every reason to become bitter, to become angry, but God first showed mercy into the life of Joseph. And this allowed him to not only, number one, provide restoration to his family, but number two, become a world changer for Jesus. He literally changed the world. My question for us this morning is, in whatever season of life you are in, whatever you're dealing with, what would mercy do for you? Well, what could mercy do for you? What would being a person of mercy look like? If we look at Matthew chapter 5, there's 9 Beatitudes that Jesus says in the first few verses. Mercy is in the very center. There's 4 before it, 4 after. Mercy is in the center. As if mercy might be the center of all of this. And if without mercy, maybe life will just kind of crumble and we'll just feel all of this weight of all of this other stuff. But I believe the life that God has called us to is a life full of mercy towards other people. Not because other people deserved mercy, but because God first showed us mercy, and now we are living our lives not focused all about ourselves, but focused on other people because of what God has done for us. Living the Jesus life and being people of mercy, let me tell you, there's times when it's not fun, it's not easy. Just think of this patient. That is not fun, not easy, but it is possible. And Joseph, I can imagine he's in the pit of the prison for years. Every single day, that's not going to be a fun day for Joseph. Dysfunctional family dynamics, that's not fun for Joseph. And there's areas in your life where at times the mercy of God and this is just flowing and it's always there, but our unwillingness to be merciful is almost holding us back like a weight that we're just holding on to because we haven't experienced the freedom of forgiveness. Living the Jesus life is all about, I think, being people of mercy. God showed mercy to Joseph first before he asked Joseph to be merciful. And Jesus, he showed mercy to you before he's asking you now to be merciful. Jesus, imagine him, God, he sent his only son, Jesus, to die on the cross for us. I think of Jesus, just like me and my firstborn daughter, Stella. What Jesus did is he took his son, sent him down to the earth to die for you specifically. I don't think I would do that. I wouldn't sacrifice my daughter Stella, and I'm sure you wouldn't sacrifice your kids either. But that's exactly what God did for you specifically. Remember, mercy is specific towards us personally. And Jesus, in the last day, before he's about to die, he's on the cross. He's beaten and blood just streaming down his face. He just got made fun of. He just got beaten out by Barnabas, or by that guy who's on the cross with him. I forgot his name right now. I remembered it the first service. Barnabas. There we go. Barabbas. I feel like I said that the first service. Maybe not. And he's on the cross. And he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Even before we even realized what was going on, Jesus says, I am going to have mercy on your life, and I'm going to die on a cross for you so that I can hold back the judgment of God, so that you are no longer destined to hell. You are no longer destined to a horrible life. You are destined to a heaven, and you are destined to a full life. That's what it says in John 10:10. Jesus saved us not because of all the righteous or the good things that we've done, but because of his mercy for us, for you specifically. And so I just want to encourage us this morning. Let's be people of mercy. Let's be people who show mercy to others because we first have experienced mercy. You are an overcomer because of God's mercy, and God says that I am for you, that I am not against you, and no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Now go and let's live the Jesus life, showing mercy to everybody around us, because when we do, we will find freedom, and we will find restoration, and we will find a full life that Jesus called us to. Let's just pray. Jesus, thank you so much for today, the opportunity just to come and Lord, be with you. God, this morning I know that maybe some of us, Lord, we're dealing with something so incredibly hard right now. God, maybe we are feeling the bitterness that Joseph felt, the anger that he felt. God, maybe it's just weighing on our life. Maybe it's defining who we are. God, if that's us, God, I just pray that, Lord, just help us to let it go and give it to you. Jesus, we love you and we say thank you so much for dying on a cross for us so that we could experience full life with you. Jesus, thank you for your mercy on our life. And Lord, help us to be people that go and be people of mercy, showing love and forgiveness to everyone around us. In your name we pray. Amen.